One of the most difficult things to do is to build successful tech products. Now, that probably seems counterintuitive at a time when it seems that everyone, from tech giants to a guy in his bedroom, is rolling out apps, setting up platforms, and launching what they hope will be the next big thing. In reality, developing a product that can both attract users and keep them is a massive challenge that most developers are not able to meet. I'm Jane Singer, and welcome back to A Seat at the Table. In each episode, we sit down with leaders, innovators, authors, and entrepreneurs so that we can learn best practices that will empower our businesses. Today, we're joined by the brilliant Riddhi Bhasker, a product manager focused on building 0-to-1 products in early-stage startup environments. She's led product development across consumer social platforms, AI-driven tools, B2B applications, and marketplace platforms, and has hands-on experience in user retention design, gamification systems, onboarding optimization, and conversational AI architecture. In this episode of A Seat at the Table, Riddhi will be discussing why most gamification kills the products it's supposed to save, how to build AI products that don't fail quietly, knowing when not to build something, and the one thing most people get wrong about building products in early-stage companies. That's a tremendous amount to unpack, and Riddhi has shared some phenomenal insights. So join me in taking an insider's look behind the scenes at what it's really like to build a successful tech product. Riddhi, thank you so much for joining us here on A Seat at the Table. It is fantastic to have you on this program. What you have to talk about is something that's of interest to me, certainly, and I think so many people listening to this podcast in actually now 176 countries around the world are really going to find this quite fascinating.
I'm so excited to share all the information I've learned. And yeah, I think the things we're discussing today are topics that I'm quite excited about too. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Well, as you've said, memory architecture is product architecture when building AI systems. What does that actually mean in practice? Because I think a lot of people are very interested in AI, but very few of us actually really understand the behind the scenes. So could you talk to us about that? You say this is within the construct of conversational AI.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, so what I generally mean is that there's a difference between like memory AI and just a memory architecture. So this is the way that I would frame it. So when an AI product is forgetting who you are mid-conversation, that is a model failure. That's not a model failure, it's like a product design failure because
Okay.
the team shipped this memory model without thinking about what memory actually means. Um, and that discussion and that distinction matters because the fix isn't really a better model, it's a better design system. Most AI systems right now are stateless by default.
Okay.
So that means every time you are starting a new conversation, the model starts from zero. They don't know who you are, they don't know what you've told it, or what you're trying to accomplish in a new session. For a one-off query tool, it's just like, hey, I want to know what the weather is today, or should I go to Alaska in December? It's fine. But if you're building something, if you're building a product where the value compounds over time, a coach, an assistant, an advisor, which is very common in a lot of AI tools now, statelessness is becoming a fundamental problem. So memory architecture is a set of decisions essentially that you will have to make about your system when it knows the cost of knowing things. So all of these are product decisions. You have a few options. You can have a full conversation, like you can have full conversation history in every call. And this is accurate, but it's very expensive because you need a lot of data to store all this information. You can also have another way of retrieving memories from a database when needed. This is cheaper, but it is only as good as your retrieval logic. And currently, there are a lot of different universities and research groups trying to find the best way to build this retrieval logic. I think one of the best ones I've read have been MEM0 from Cornell University. I think another mistake that I've seen is teams treating memory as like a version 2 problem, and they initially will just ship like a conversational product that has no memory design. And then they try to implement memory models in like version 2. The thing is, memory is being shaped from the entire user experience. So you can't start building on version 2 because you've already lost so much essential data.
Right.
And then they end up storing a lot and then they surface nothing. So you're logging all this, like you log this log is existing in a model, but then you can't actually use this in a meaningful data, which is the retrieval logic. And then another thing is you ignore something called a memory drift. So a user will tell you something and about themselves in one session, and then let's say 5 months later, that's no longer true because they've kind of forgotten that memory existing because there's not enough space in the data, because there's only a certain amount of existing like data from the bottom till like upwards that they can access in one shot. So yeah, this is a trust problem and it's disguised as like a technical one. So I think the product principle I always come back to is that when you're really trying to build like a memory model, you really have to think about the architecture. It's not just a little feature that you're shipping out. Your whole entire product depends on it. And if your system is trying to remember something, it's remembering noise if you're not creating that architecture properly. Yeah, I hope this is a good answer.
I think that's really interesting. And you're right. I think there is more demand, like you say, for this kind of, well, this is not a technical term, but relationship building, so to speak, from the user's point of view, right? On the user
Mm-hmm.
experience side, they want that, as you say, that coach, that mentor who remembers things about them and can refer back to that in the next, and the next, and the next interaction. And yet,
Yep.
how do you store all that, right? Because obviously things have become very data intensive. Can you retrieve it fast enough to make it so that it's interactive without waiting for a long time? And then, as you're pointing out, how do you know what to get rid of because something's changed? Um, conceptually, I know where you're going with that. How do they get around those problems, or maybe they can't at the moment?
Um, Yeah, I think this is a great question. Like, how do you train your AI
Mm.
to be able to access this vast amount of data that you've given in a way that is correct, in line with what you want? Because I think a lot of us know hallucinations are real, right? You
Yeah,
ask
yeah,
the AI something and it tells you something completely that you didn't ask about, or it gives you a very vague answer.
right.
Um, and I think we are quite early on in like the AI realm where we're still trying to solve this memory problem. Um, I think the three approaches that I'm aware of that most teams are using right now is, yeah, they either are just giving this AI the full entire context, and then they're like, hey, go, I'm going to give you a query, and you have all this data about me. Please give me an answer. Or you have all this data about this project that I've been working on. Give me the answer. And let's say this data or this memory has been compounding over like 9 months. You're working on a project at your work. This model does work, but the only problem is it's very slow and it's also very expensive because you need to be able to store like 9 months worth of data into a server. And the thing is, your data is being stored in like tokens, right? Each
Right.
letter or like each number essentially becomes a token, and there's a token limit. Um, and then if you're giving access to this vast amount of data that it has to access in one shot, the process is going to be slow because they have to read through everything before they say anything, and that's a bit hard. Another way is that you retrieve only what's relevant. So essentially, over time, when this memory is being compounded, it gets stored in a way that in groups. So like certain groups are referring to certain topics. So once you give a query, what will happen is it'll go back to all these different groups. We'll see where like the top 1 to 5 groups where your query is matching. And then from that, it will retrieve the data. Now, the problem is, so this is something like retrieval augmented generation, and they're still testing a lot of different like RAG models right now.
Mm.
So again, the retrieval is only good as like the retrieval logic. Or another way that people are experimenting now is that you compress these conversations into summaries. So you do something like, is it a semantic memory or is it a fact? Like, is this just like something conversational, or is this like a fact that, hey, I'm Riddhi and my favorite color is pink? That's a fact. Something like, ooh, I went for a coffee today and I met my friend. That's just semantic. That's just a story that it can store again as a different kind of summary. The problem here again can be the way that it's summarized, the way that context is given, because if you have, I don't know, let's say like 10 paragraphs worth of information summarized into 2 paragraphs, you have to make sure that summary is good. Otherwise, the context won't be correct, and therefore any query thereafter given won't be the best. So, yeah, I think latency problems here are quite real. I think companies like AWS are literally launching managed memory services where teams are spending months building it themselves. Um, yeah, I think we're still early stages, but a lot of research has been going on. I think since, I don't know, 2023, when I first started using ChatGPT, I've seen a lot of distinction and like growth in memory models and like just AI in general. And I think Anthropic is doing a great job. I switched from ChatGPT to Claude now. I think Claude has a better way of contextualizing things that you want. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting as you explain it, and it makes me wonder, so many different products are coming out now with an AI component to it. I mean, almost anything, right? Whether or not it makes sense for it or not, AI, right, is now the fairy dust that's being sprinkled on everything. Um, so you see a lot of applications coming out and have AI components. And you wonder, as I'm listening to you explain this, whether most companies are going to be able to support the kind of functions that you're discussing. I mean, yes, I can see how Amazon could do that, right? How Google could do that. Um, but everybody, I mean, won't that be a massively expensive, if nothing else, undertaking?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I I agree with you. AI fairy dust is a good way of framing it because I think a lot of people are just throwing AI as like as a term. It's just become a term people are using in the tech industry these days. And I've seen a lot of videos and a lot of articles on how the AI bubble exists and only a few companies will survive. Sometimes people say, no, the AI bubble is not real. All companies might thrive, or a lot of companies might thrive. I think the test that I'm using when I see new products come out is if you remove the AI component, would your product still have a reason to exist?
Oh,
Like,
interesting.
if yes, then AI is just a feature. It's helping your product give better results, be faster, it's more resourceful.
Mm,
If no, then you either have a very genuinely AI native product or you have nothing. So maybe an AI native product could be Claude.
right.
But also on top of Claude, if you remove the AI component, Claude doesn't exist. But with AI, I'm using Claude Code every day. I have Claude summarize research papers so I can understand better. I'm able to build things that I couldn't build before, so it works. But yeah, if you remove the AI component and then you look at the product, if it's just meaningless, then I guess there's something you want to think about.
Mm,
And then another thing is memory is where this is getting exposed the fastest. Like
right.
a basic chatbot with memory, with like no memory, can fake being used in a demo and then real use, like you show it to investors or stakeholders. You created a chatbot. Sure, for like 2 days, it can give you good answers, but long time usage, if it's not really giving you what you want, if the outcome is not what you want, then it almost feels like it's disposable. Um, and I do feel like most companies right now are not able to support real memory infrastructure because it's very complex, right? I don't know how technical I can go, but generally, your memory and this context is being stored into vector databases. You need proper retrieval logic, which people are still researching about. You have summarization pipelines. All the context that you're giving is being summarized in certain ways. There's cost management, like you said, building these huge data servers. It's not cheap. We've seen how much OpenAI has invested to just build these data centers we know how many billions and like dollars of being are invested just to like have the capability to use it, to have enough infrastructure to actually store all this data. So that's another reason, that's another like factor I see where it could like miss out on. And I think the companies that will survive this wave are the ones who ask, what does the user actually need to accomplish? And does AI genuinely make that better? Or are you just stamping it as another word or a keyword, right? Because as a
Yes,
product
yeah.
manager, the biggest thing is if you are not able to deliver value to your customer through your product, then it's not real. If you're only chasing metrics, then it's not real. If you're actually able to solve a user's problem, and then if AI is actually helping make it better or faster or more resourceful, then you have something. But if you can't do that, then the question still remains, is it just another like, AI terminology used, or is it a real product?
We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
We were hiring when we were making 50 to 100K monthly losses.
And why? Welcome to episode 1.
I can't think of a single founder who's been around for a decent amount of time in business who hasn't had their tunnel of year. This was that year. We're going to be okay, yeah, Sheree. Some are going to hear this and think you TDP, but hear me out. You only have to do the math to understand that very soon we were $500,000 down.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I'm so glad that you've explained that. And I like the fact that you mentioned the demo because, oh my gosh, not just AI, but so many tech products, right? They develop the demo and they spend so much time tweaking it in every possible way so that it shows really, really well. And then when you get it into a real life use case, it doesn't work because the demo has been, revised a million times so that it doesn't fail. So it's
Exactly.
great that you brought that up. It's just, we'll laugh sometimes when you see some of the technology, the demo versus what it's like to use it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think as a PM, there have been so many times where you just want to make the demo work, right? You just want to like show them enough things that, hey, this works. We have these like 5 features, and they'll work on like very small scale, but like when you
Right.
actually build it at scale to be able to, yeah, like work on your full platform, work with all the data that you have, work with 500 users using it, then it becomes like a big deal. I think,
Right.
yeah, so demos are also great in showcasing basic features that you have, but also I think, yeah, you should never like oversell it to a point where your demo does one thing, but the actual product can never really align with what you promised.
Oh, absolutely. And I see that all the time. And I think people who work in tech probably see it even more than I do. Um, but yeah. Anyway, you talk about gamification. You've done a lot of work on gamification, which I think is really interesting. And you say you've seen mechanics that were supposed to drive engagement, but it actually pushed people away. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. This is something I feel very strongly about because I've watched it happen up close. And this is something that I've actually worked on at my previous company and my previous workplaces. So we worked on a consumer product and we introduced a street mechanic, very basic gamification thing. It's worked for a lot of people. There are plenty of studies on it. The idea was simple. Users come in, you reward them for active engagement on this social app, and then if you miss the day, the streak would also drop. So you essentially are incentivizing them to keep coming back. But then something like weird started happening where like after a few days, after like long streak builds, when the streaks would kind of die off because the user didn't come back for 4 to 5 days, we saw that like retentions were kind of dropping, right? And once these users are gone after losing their like 200-day streaks, they're gone. They're not coming back. They're just like heartbroken almost.
Right.
And I think this is something I would like call like as an over justification effect. Like these users churned because we'd almost destroyed the one thing that had been protecting the users to like keep coming back. So we introduced an external reward, and over time it becomes like the only reason that people are showing up. And then when it breaks, the behavior also changes. So the user isn't coming back. And it's great because your metrics look great for a while, but then they stop the minute this behavior broke. And I think, yeah, the biggest like things that I've learned here is that gamification mechanics need to reinforce the core value of your product, not replace it. If people are like partaking in, like, are using your product more often, and then also the gamification mechanic is just like aiding them or making them more excited to use it, great. But the second that they're only coming back because of a mechanic, like let's say the streak in this instance, the second the streak is gone, they're gone too. And a lot of like different apps have seen it. Snapchat, Duolingo, we have like real life case studies.
Right.
Another thing is that the mechanic that you are designing for your power, users can be weaponized by it, because if you think that you suddenly have this power because of this mechanic you created, and then they're coming back, but it's almost like an obligation and not free will, right? So the second this mechanic breaks, you no longer have the power and you've lost like engaged users that you had before. And I think this is one of the biggest things, that metrics are not always the truth, especially with regards to gamification. Metrics can go up for 7 days, for 14 days, for 13 days. But if your metrics are not the same at like week 1 and then week 10, you really have something to think about, right? Just because retention went up for the first week after you launched a new feature doesn't mean it's successful. You have to see the long-term use of it. And like I mentioned, Duolingo is a very interesting case in the realm of gamification, because we know that people are obsessed with Duolingo. People keep coming back. They have like 500-day streak parties and everything. But then when you actually talk to users and see what they have to say, sometimes they're just coming in at like midnight, 2 a.m. just to like get their streak in. And then when you actually ask them if they've learned a lot from Duolingo, a lot of them can't say that they have. So yeah, I don't think gamification is bad. I think it's fantastic if it's used correctly, but you have to design it in a way where it's not feeling like an obligation for the users, that they're not being controlled, they're not trapped. It's there because it actually excites them, makes them feel more competent, and makes them feel better and more engaged to come back to the app or the product. Yeah.
It's interesting because I actually play around with an app called Brilliant, and they do the same thing with streaks,
Mm-hmm.
right? They remind you, oh, your streak is going to end or something like that. And it does
Mm-hmm.
push you that you don't want it to end. I don't know what would happen if I ever let it end.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I find it interesting to play around with it. Using their thing they sent me to learn to code in Python. Um,
Yeah.
and it's a good distraction from the work I'm supposed to be doing when I'm at my desk.
Yeah.
So that little streak reminder definitely does get my attention, whether or not, if I didn't get to it for a week or two and they just told me that it
Mm-hmm.
ended, would I continue with it? Yeah, I probably would, but I understand
Mm-hmm.
that, like, you're right, the momentum builds. And when you lose that, whatever it is, you have less incentive to come back. So that being the case, how do you then overcome that? When you're building an app or any kind of a system around gamification.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. And I agree, like, just to address the streak thing, I totally agree. Sometimes for some apps, gamification works. Like, for instance, Brilliant, it's teaching you something new. So even if you took like a 5-day break, you're still incentivized to like come back, learn. For a fitness app, again, you could have like a 14-day streak and then you take a 5-day break, you're back because you're building a genuine habit. I think to address how do you actually build a feature where people genuinely keep coming back, is, again, it's an addition on top of your core product.
Mm,
So I guess an example here with the social app that I was working on, we had another feature called challenges was directly linked to mechanics within the app that existed. So in our social app, you can post a story. The story lasts for 10 minutes. Now, this challenge gamification feature essentially is prompting users to post a story, but there's like a prompt. It's like, post a picture with your best friend drinking your favorite drink, or show us how you make your morning coffee. So you're essentially adding to the mechanic that already exists on the app. People already are posting stories. Now you're just like giving them another incentive to post it. If you remove the challenges feature, there's the users will still stay because they're still doing a certain action regardless of that feature. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah.
So exactly. So I think gamification works in a way where the core product or the core features that you have already speak for themselves, but now this extra element is essentially making it even better, or it's just prompting them more to do a certain action or something like that. So a totally random example, but in like a B2B product, you'll see progress bars. Like let's say
Right.
LinkedIn, for example, when you're setting up your profile, it'll have like a progress bar like, oh, you've completed 4 out of 5 steps. Do this to make your profile even better. You're incentivized to do it because you're already using LinkedIn. You already have your profile set up. Now they're just like adding onto it to make it a bit more fun. And they're also guiding you to use their product better and then discover extra features. So like before I didn't know I could add projects onto my LinkedIn profile. Now I know I can because LinkedIn told me and they have a progress bar. So I think the best way to implement gamification onto your products is to understand what do the users love right now? What are they using? And if they are using something, how can I make it even better for them? Without making it feel like an obligation or a trap. Because once you trap them, that's when they start getting frustrated, angsty. And then once they're gone, they're gone. You've increased your churn rate. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And I hadn't thought about it that way. But now that
Mhm.
you explain it, I can see how gamification really has to be sort of an enhancement on top of something that people already are incentivized to do. And the gamification, or as you say, the progress line, the progress bar, just makes it even that more engaging. But yes, having been through many things on my own, where I can see how you get into something and then you fall off the wagon, so to speak, and which things are easier to get back on and which things are like, it's like that program 75 hard, right? Where you have to follow
Yeah,
this really strict workout routine, diet, and everything. And the moment you mess up on one day, you're back to zero. And at that point, you're just
exactly.
like, well, I'm out of here. Um, I've already been outside 3 days in a row in the teeming rain doing my exercise bit. And oh, today, I had a travel day, so I couldn't do it. And now it's back to zero. Nope, no more.
Yeah. Yeah, you're
So,
just
yeah.
so you're just discouraged to continue.
Yes, yes, it works against you in that respect. So, yeah, I think it's
Mm-hmm.
really interesting that you brought that up because I think that, we hear about all these terms, especially for those of us who are not working inside the tech industry, and they
Mm-hmm.
all seem so sparkly and attractive, and we need to add this on and that on without really thinking through the entire, step from beginning to end. And like, well, yeah, you can add gamification to some aspect of your business, but right, here's the downside to that. It's not just makes it stickier and more engaging. It actually could become the thing that derails and creates more churn, as you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very,
Yeah.
very, yeah. Now you talk about the fact that the feature you don't build actually being one of the most important product decisions. And I really like that because I think that a lot of
Mm-hmm.
us, and me too, suffers from wanting to include everything. And it's very hard to have that discipline to know when to say no, what things, you trim or what things you're like, that's just making it overwhelming, making it too complicated. So can you talk about that from your point of view?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think biggest things I've learned as a product manager is sometimes you just don't need to build everything and you don't have to say yes to everything.
Right.
And genuinely the way that I've started seeing this is that every feature proposition that ever comes from anyone really on the team, it's a bet, right?
Right.
You're betting your team's time, you are betting your users' attention, you are betting your product's focus. And usually, like in early stage setups, when from my experience, when resources are limited, you don't really have the luxury of saying yes to everything because you don't have enough time, you don't have enough resources. You really need to build something that is showing your value, your product's value to your users. And you'll hear me say product value a lot of times because I think this is something that a lot of people have forgotten or don't put enough strain on, that your product's value has to be shown to the users. Otherwise, they just won't want to use it. So Anyways, coming back to sometimes like saying no and when not to build a feature, genuinely, the questions I always ask is, what are we unable to do if we build this? Or like, what do we have to stop building now if we build this feature? Because yeah, like I said, shipping isn't free. Every feature that you build is another thing that you have to maintain. You have to
Yes,
maintain the documents. You have more support required for this feature on your product, because if this breaks, you need to fix it. Or because you shipped a new feature, something else that exists might break, you need to fix that. um
exactly.
and this is very important to like basically understand the pros and cons of like shipping this feature. And another hard thing when it comes to like saying no or just understanding whether or not to ship something is, um especially when it's coming from like key stakeholders, from the CEOs, from like directors. They're like, hey, we want to build this. And usually what they know is good information because it's coming from either user feedback or other people that they've spoken to. But the key thing to understand here is always the outcome that they're trying to achieve, not the
Right.
feature they want you to build. So if they say, hey, I want to build a new button that does XYZ, I will ask them, okay, I see you, but also, what are we trying to accomplish here? What is the end goal? Like, do you want to drive user engagement? Do you want more registrations? Do you want higher like click-through rates on the app? What is it that you want to achieve, and what is the general outcome? And a lot of the times, the feature request isn't really the answer to the outcome that they are trying to achieve. So generally, I will go off asking them 2 to 3 questions. So one is that, what is the user problem that you're trying to solve, and how do we know that this problem exists? You're coming here to me with a feature request. I get that. But what are we trying to solve, and where did you get the feedback from? Two is, what's the simplest way to test whether solving this actually moves the metrics that you care about? So if we are solving this problem, is it also solving the metrics that we care about, or the outcome that we care about as well? And then if we don't build this, how bad is it for us?
Right.
Because essentially there is a cost of building it, and then there is a cost of not building it. So is the cost of building it today high or low than if I build it in the next sprint? Because
Mm.
you really have to like care about the amount of time, the resources, and the cost of building something. So usually I will use the phrase not yet instead of no, because you
Right.
want to
Yeah.
make sure people are seen and heard, and you understand the problem you're trying to solve, the outcome you have, the metrics you're trying to solve for. It can go in the backlog. You can have a feature refinement session with other product managers, with other engineers. But never say no, because sometimes it's important, just maybe not yet,
Right.
maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Let's think about it. Let's rehash it. Um, yeah, I think one thing that I always go by is that nobody tells you about saying no, how saying no is like protecting your product. If you start saying yes
Mm.
to everything, you will be stuck in a pile of tickets and to-do lists, and it's never ending because users want everything. And if you can build everything for them, they will ask you to build everything. But sometimes you just have to like pick and choose the best things that achieve the greatest amount in like least amount of time, maybe. And yeah, that's usually how I go about it.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, that alone is something everybody needs to listen to, take to heart. And I have to remind
Mm-hmm.
myself of this all the time. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. And you're right.
Yep.
You know, you end up building all these things, and whether you're doing something that's technical or something that's non-technical, you end up being a feature factory. Everything you think of
Mm-hmm.
seems like a great idea, and then you forget how much time, money, human resources, everything else gets sucked up into
Yeah.
developing something like that. Nothing else is being maintained, or it's not being maintained well.
Mm-hmm.
And as you say, the new thing you build sometimes disrupts the old thing that
Mm-hmm.
people liked and that
Definitely.
was foundational in what you did. So it just ends up with something too hard to control and manage. And you see that all the time nowadays, because it seems that we are driven from that marketing point of view of always wanting to be able to say the new thing we're doing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you end up with a nightmare. It's very few companies that have the discipline that you're talking about, and yet it's so important to be able to run your business or your product that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. I think the funny thing is today I was in a meeting and we had a bunch of requests from our users who directly use our platform, and they voted like 5 or 4 level priority out of 5 on every feature that they requested. And
Oh,
when I was talking to my engineers, we were like, guys, we can't build all of this because it seems like all 10 features that were proposed are a 4 or 5 in priority level, but
right.
we're only 5 of us. How do we build all of it? And there are like all these other things that you need to that are already in the backlog. And then there's a support channel where things break. Things break every single day, and you have to be able to fix it quickly. So at this point, you can't even give them like a 2 week timeline because there'll be 5 things broken tomorrow that you need to fix ASAP, but you're also working on 10 tickets that all have a 5 out of 5 priority. So yeah, I think really just taking a step back, understanding what you are really trying to solve and which feature, if you are building anything, solves the maximum amount of problems that you can prioritize and has been requested or will be used by maximum amount of users, because that really, like, we have prioritization frameworks for a reason. But yeah, I think it's something that we've all experienced, and it genuinely just takes some time to like understand and approach properly.
Absolutely. And it sounds easy, right? It's simple to
Mm-hmm.
understand, but very, very difficult when you're sitting there and trying to figure out what do we say no to? Or as you said, what do
Exactly.
we say not now?
Yeah, not yet. Just I think, yeah, I think some of my managers have given me the advice that just say, yep, that's a fantastic idea. Noted. It's in my backlog. Just not yet. And when we will, we'll let you know. And we'll let you know when the time comes.
Yeah,
Just test.
absolutely. Now, you've led product development for companies going from zero to launch in multiple
Mhm.
startup environments. What's the one thing that people get wrong when they're building these early stage companies? Because this is something, especially nowadays, a lot of people are building. I think it seems more so
Mhm.
than ever before, early stage companies.
Yep. This is one of my favorite questions. I think what most people the thing that I've seen is most people are trying to build a version like version 1 or MVP that's already ready for like version 10's problem.
Right.
And in doing that, they don't actually end up shipping a version that actually works.
Mm,
Um, the biggest problem is like you from your MVP, like the most minimum viable product, you are trying to solve for scale, for edge cases, for enterprise features before you have even figured out what the core thing that you're trying to build is. And then you end up shipping something that doesn't work, or it confuses users, or it just has a bunch of jargons that no one really understands. And then you're sat there questioning, what went wrong? And I think early stage product development is fundamentally about reducing uncertainty as fast and cheaply as possible. Every
mhm.
decision you make should be answering a question: what do users actually want? And will they pay for this? Does the onboarding flow work? Will they register? You're not really building the full product yet. You are just running a series of experiments that essentially converge into a final product. And I know like people think that resource constraint can seem like a curse in like early stage startups, but I actually happen to see it as a gift, given I've worked in like almost 4 to 5 early stage startups now, or just like Series A, Series B. Um, when you can't build everything, you are forced to prioritize very ruthlessly. So you have to ask, if I have only 1 week to build this, what am I building that reduces our biggest unknowns or solves the maximum amount of problems? And I think this discipline is incredibly valuable. And most teams lose in the moment that they raise money and feel like they can do everything and they
Right.
can build the biggest, biggest product ever and just like scale. And another thing I think people get wrong is that a distributed or a cross-functional team at early stage works the same as it does in a bigger company like Google. It doesn't. You can't always rely on like a specific process because you don't have as much time or as many people. You have to rely on judgments, on shared context, on trust, that you trust each other's decision in building like the best possible things as quickly as possible. And that means communication has to be constant. You have to be very comfortable with ambiguity because some things can break tomorrow. The thing you're building today becomes irrelevant, or you have to completely switch scopes. And yeah, I think generally your team culture has to be calm and really in sync. And I am living this currently as well. Like we have sprints going on, or we will have generally like our big features that we are building. We have backlogs, but every day there's a different support request coming in. There's a new idea that can actually help solve the problem of 10 users in one go. So suddenly you're asked to switch scope. So you don't always rely on, hey, I have a 2-week sprint, I have 8 engineers, I've given you the ticket, I've given you the PRD, I've done these refinement sessions, go build. It just doesn't work like that. So yeah, I think biggest lessons are generally what I've mentioned. You really have to prioritize, you have to be in sync, you have to communicate constantly, and you have to be okay with ambiguity because scopes change all the time, and you have to be ready for that. Yeah.
I think that's really important. And, there's a lot to take away, not only for people who are in the tech sector, but for anybody who's running a business these days, is to be able to understand what stage you're at and
Yep.
play to those strengths, so to speak, because I think that a lot of times people start things, and as you said, their point of reference is Google, right, or Apple, or something that's Microsoft, and it's like, well, this is the way they do things there, and they're like, well, you're not there, and that's not just for
Yeah.
tech. A lot of us who are not in tech think that we need to be something that we would never have the resources to do, at least not at the moment. So you end up, in a sense, overwhelming yourself and squandering the resources you have,
Yep.
getting caught up in things that maybe not what you should focus on. I think your points are good about, narrowing the focus and what can you really deliver on.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, I think being in product for like 2 to 3 years now, early stage startups have taught me a lot because you're building from ground up. So you learn a lot of big things very early on. And I mean, it's true. I have friends who work at Meta, who work at Apple, and listening to them and the way that they process their features and the way that they work on a day to day is so different from mine. And we're just sat there thinking, oh, like you have to get authorization from like 10 different people before you push one feature. Here I am building 10 things just because one person was like, hey, I need this, and I'm like, okay, I'm on it.
Yeah.
So it's a great difference, but yeah, I think it's been a wonderful experience, and I've learned so much in all the time that I've spent at these startups.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you really do learn a lot when you are in a startup environment or a very small business environment because you really have your hands in the clay, much more so.
Yep.
And so therefore you're very involved in the process, which is important. From a learning point of view, absolutely. Now
Yeah.
you mentioned, non-obvious lessons. What, from your point of view, are non-obvious lessons that you've learned from shipping products that actually work versus products that look good as demos, circling back to our conversation about things that are, fantastic as demos, and then when they go live in any kind of a real environment, are not exactly what they looked like.
Oh yeah. I love this question. I think one of my biggest things that I always say is that when you are building something as the CEO, CTO, product manager, engineer, you tend to be product blind. You think what you're building is the most intuitive and understandable thing on planet Earth, but that's because you're building it.
Right,
You know the logic, you know the backend infrastructure, you know every crook and cranny about your product because you're the builder. So
right.
when you are testing out or doing your demos or doing the testing of your platform, you know what to do because you built it, you designed it. So you're like, yep, this is great, fantastic. Let's ship it, let the users use it. And then once you start doing actual user testing and they come back with questions at step 1 or step 2, you're sat there thinking, but I thought this was obvious. But it's not, because the users are seeing everything with fresh eyes. To them, this is a complete new invention. And just because you thought it was easy doesn't mean they will too. And I think yeah, this is such an important thing to learn as a builder, or any builder, right? Whether it's a business, whether it's a tech product, is that step into the user's shoes. Pretend like you don't know anything about this product and then run through your product or your app or your platform. Is it obvious? Did you find any bugs? Like, did you find any issues? And yeah, if so, then based on that, iterate or just get user feedback at earlier stages rather than at like version 2 or version 3 of a shipped product. Um, yeah, I think that's one of the biggest like non-obvious lessons. I think a second one that I could say is um, silent failure can be a lot more dangerous than loud failure.
Mm,
Um, like a crash tells you that something has broken, and but then an AI product giving you a very confident wrong answer tells you nothing, and it just
right.
leaves the user like quietly waiting. They don't know that the answer is wrong. They'll believe it because the world has told us AI is giving you the best answers, or like just trust it, right?
Right.
Everything, every
Yeah.
query or every question we have, we're not even using Google anymore. We're just like on ChatGPT, hey, can you tell me if I should use this medicine? When
Right.
did we think that was okay? Another thing I could say is that products that work in production, like on like essentially like shipped products, are obsessively very simple, and then demos will hide complexity behind a great presenter.
Yes.
Production exposes everything that's unnecessary, every confusing label, right? Same thing that we've been talking about. Because if I'm leading a product demo as a product manager, I'm gonna run through it and show it to everyone else, every stakeholder, like, hey, this is what you do. You go here, you click there, boom, done. And then I make it sound like it's so simple. But then when it's actually in production, when it's actually out there for the world to see and they start using it, that's when like everything starts coming out. All the like unnecessary steps or labels will start popping up and be like, hey, maybe I didn't need that. And like I said, I think the best way to handle all these issues is do user testing as early as possible, because that is your best way of knowing if what you're shipping is actually working, if the product you built is actually worth the user's attention, and if it's worth making it even bigger. Yeah, I think what separates teams from shipping things at last, who ship things at first or at last, is
Right.
they're like optimizing for that demo moment. They're just
Right.
trying to like reach that demo moment, show that hey, everything works. But when it's actually out there for the world, um, and the user doesn't really understand what you've built, like nothing else matters if your demo is successful. But at the end of the day, if the actual user doesn't get it, let's have a rethink about the way that you're operating or building stuff. Yeah, so always test early. And yeah, don't hide behind your demos.
That's so true. And it is really interesting. And it's a good heads up for people who
Mm-hmm.
are looking to implement any kind of tech or any kind of other product into their company, whether you're building it or whether you're buying it, right? I mean, if you build it, you have to
Mm-hmm.
think about what your user experience is going to be like. But at the same time, if you're someone who's looking to add, whether it's a simple app or a more complex system, you have to be able to look beyond the demo. And I had a
Definitely.
guy on the show, maybe it's been 3 years now. Probably the first guy I ever had on talking about AI when AI first came onto the radar of most people who don't work in tech.
Mm-hmm.
And he was pointing out a lot of things, and he said, never trust the demo. He said, ask the people if they're actually using this product in their company. He said, more often
Right.
than not, they're not using it in their company, but they're happy to
Mm-hmm.
sell it to other people. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's such an interesting way to look at it. Because you can, as he said, if the example you're using in the demo doesn't work, you just change the example, right? The sample data
Yeah.
doesn't work, you change the data. But when you're using it in a real life situation, it has to work with whatever you actually need it to work with. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting that you brought that up and that you've been able to unpack that a bit further for us.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that it's so funny that you said that guy said they don't use the product that they're building.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
that's
I
a
can't
funny
remember his name
point
off the
coming.
top of my head right now, but he'd been in the industry for a very long time. And, he shared a lot of interesting things about
Yeah.
misconceptions people have, not just around AI, but around a lot of different technical things. And, it just made me laugh because I thought, oh, yeah, exactly right. The demo always
Mm-hmm.
looks so good. You see it
Yeah.
presented, as you said, you have a really good presenter and it
Mm-hmm.
looks fantastic. This is going to solve all your problems. And then you wonder, why doesn't it work in our company? How come we can't get it to do this kind of thing with, in our situation? So yeah, very, very interesting.
Yeah, sometimes I think demos are fine, but like then onboarding people onto your product is another big chore to do.
Yes.
Um, if you have like a plethora of features and different things that they can do, to learn it is so hard. Recently came across a job role called Notion consultant. I love Notion. I use it every single day. But there are also so many things that exist that I don't know about, and turns out there are Notion consultants who actually help you
Right.
onboard onto the product even better and like make you see features that you've never seen before. I think it works for Notion because their core value is so easy to see that everyone can do like their main like to-do list, their documentation, everything can everything that you immediately need, you can see. So then users are more inclined to just explore by themselves. They're not gonna leave because they already use it for so many of their things. But yeah, for something that you don't immediately see value of and you have like 10 other features waiting in line to be seen, it's very easy to lose products. But yeah, I guess onboarding always becomes another big big task, big battle for a lot of product builders.
Absolutely. And it's the kind of thing that people tend to skip over because, like
Mm-hmm.
you say, it's very labor intensive. It
Yeah.
needs to be very customized. It's all the kind of things that don't scale, that therefore nobody wants to really put a lot of resources into. But yeah, very, very important. Well, Riddhi,
Mm-hmm.
thank you so much for sharing tremendous insights that I think really highlight a lot of what happens around tech that we really all need to understand as people who certainly are users of tech, if not developers. A lot of us are, looking at systems to bring into our businesses, but also a
Mm-hmm.
lot of, really interesting principles that relate to non-tech aspects of running a business. So really fantastic. Totally, I learned a lot. I really learned a tremendous amount from you. Thank you. Thanks for being with us here today on A Seat at the Table. If you'd like to see some of the other episodes, head on over to our podcast website at seat.fm. That's seat.fm. There's also a link here in the show notes. And if you're thinking that you'd like to be a guest on the show, you'll find information on how to apply there as well. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Jane Singer, and I will see you in the next episode.